Afternoon, everybody. Getting in our recap here for today. Take a look here on the hourly first. We spoke yesterday about the possibility of price just continuing to dig up and through the highs. Right, so we have our daily fair value gap here. We wanted to see if price would continue to run buy side. That's kind of what we are expecting, right? Price wants to reach for buy side, so any kind of run lower should be seen as a short-term run on stops before continuing in our direction here. So once again, we'll continue to look for buy side targets. This level here is our 4-hour fair value gap. So we spoke this morning about this fair value gap here offering us support if we were going to trade up into it. Lo and behold, we wick into that beautifully. We actually hold the higher fair value gap too. So we like to see that. Right, when we wick into both of these but still close above the higher one, just a good sign that price will want to continue to reach for buy side. Working down here on the time frames now. On this 15, that's kind of the same thing. So we clear highs, right? Clear this buy side. We do form a short-term breaker in here. So quickly, I'm going to move all of these. Right, if we were going to look, really two areas here. We got this high to low to a higher high. I, however, favor this one here. That gives us a true down close candle. So I'd go high to a low to a higher high, right? And we close underneath that here with this candle. So at that point, we could look for just short-term delivery into sell-side targets. We understand this 4-hour here was kind of our objective for the inefficiency. So if we're going to have sell-side resting here, it makes sense to target that first. We've obviously been moving higher and higher, so we need to come back down, pick up some sell stops, grab some liquidity so we can continue to move higher. Right, this breaker held nicely. You'll see if we kind of pull that out. Right, once we close underneath it, move the structure. Right, so we form a breaker going into a daily fair value gap, close underneath. Candle bodies now hold the mean threshold of that breaker. And you'll also notice that we have that new day opening gap level as well as the 830. So all of these premiums are just going to hold price and send us lower for the time being. As we continue to work down through the time frames here, right, I can go to the 1 minute just to show what we were looking at. So this is the breaker. We're going to remove it because really no need to have that on there now. You'll see that in London. We do form some relative equal lows, right, just above yesterday's low here as well. So that is why we expected to see these lows be cleared, right? If we're going to have liquidity resting above liquidity, just going to be a good magnet on price to send it lower. As we were heading into the 9:30 opening now, we really were just kind of chopping. So we had already traded into the daily fair value gap high. We were kind of interested to see if we wanted to reject immediately from here or continue to dig up into that daily fair value gap. This level here is that buy side that we had mentioned yesterday, and we actually deliver into that before the 9:30 open even happens. As we deliver into that, we created a fair value gap here. And this is where our attention really lied on. So at the 9:30 opening, we wick into it. We're kind of just chopping in here, and we get a short-term run higher, creating now a new swing point, a short-term high, buy-side pull. We now retrace back into this original 1 minute. Still hold, notice that. And also notice how we created equal lows here. So this is indicating that price is creating liquidity to attack, right? And although it did get left here, you'll see how we come back down and interact with that later in the morning. So we engineer this liquidity first. We then attack the buy side. And at that point, then we get that reversal that we're looking for. If we were to look here, we actually have a little fractalized YouTube model. These are equal highs. We clear those. This here is a swing low. We break through that swing low with a volume imbalance. All right, so look at that volume imbalance here. As we're breaking through, we're creating a volume imbalance, leaving a fair value gap. And this is actually where we took our first short of the morning that we shared. All right, so we end up getting short here. We can show you quickly. Right, sell first here. We then get short again as we break through this low. So we buy on this low originally, up into the highs. Right, as we break through the low, creating a new premium. This is where we now add. So we're using that volume imbalance, using the fair value gap. and understanding that price will now want to deliver lower. Because why, right? We had engineered this sell side here. So this became our first target. And that's why you see we go from this premium straight into sell side. We do give an aggressive sell off, actually targeting sell side from just that rollover period. So we end up clearing this sell side here as well. And then from here, we give a retracement back up into a bearish fair value gap. So not only is this a bearish fair value gap, but it's also right aligned with a breaker. Rather ugly breaker, but still the concept nonetheless. From this high to the equal lows to the highest high, as we break through that level, right, we're breaking through the low with the fair value gap. The lows can become the breaker, consecutive down close, right? This is obviously large. We can refine it to the lowest down close here. And when we do that, we see how these two areas overlap here. Price delivers perfectly into the high of the breaker, but actually holds the 1 minute fair value gap. So if I move the breaker here, you'll see how we hold the 1 minute fair value gap high and break back underneath. In theory now balancing this fair value gap. And that's why we're comfortable going short here now. Right, so we go short right on that fair value gap, stop above the fair value gap, and we understand that we have a short-term low here, and our actual target was the midnight open. So we'll show you where we partialed. Sell side here first, midnight open was the final target. But we're comfortable adding here because, as we mentioned, we have the breaker, we have the premium fair value gap. Price is showing that it wants to respect that and has now closed back underneath. So there's no need to return back above that until we deliver into our sell side objectives. As price breaks lower, right, this larger area here is the daily. Let's not forget that. So as we're breaking out and underneath the daily fair value gap, we can now expect that we can use that as another form of resistance. Right, and inside of here, I'm going to show you what the second entry comes on. It's actually a 15-minute. So this is the 15-minute fair value gap that is formed prior to the 9:30 opening. Right, so this is important to us. It's a fair value gap that forms as we deliver into buy side. So if we can clear and break underneath that fair value gap, it should act as a inversion fair value gap. Because we understand that, now this is the 15 minutes, so let's not get confused here. We have the original 1 minute that we used to get short the first time. We close underneath that. Now this 15 here is important because on the 15-minute chart, the 15-minute candle closes underneath this fair value gap at 10:15. So this candle right here is when the 15-minute candlestick closes. And we notice that it is closing underneath this 15-minute fair value gap for the first time. So at this point, we have actually gone ahead and created the inversion fair value gap here. We've confirmed that. So now our second entry just comes on the tap of the inversion 15-minute. So you see how we can overlap these concepts and ideas, really build a clear picture of price that gives us a good understanding of what to expect. So from here, same idea, right? We partial out at this low. You then see us go ahead and add at this fair value gap now. At this point here, we've broken underneath the 8:30 open. We've left the daily fair value gap. We've broken underneath the new day opening price here as well. So a lot of things pointing towards lower prices because we also have now created new liquidity just above our midnight open target. So you see how we're engineering this liquidity. We're turning into inefficiencies before attacking that liquidity. So with this entry, right, we understand, okay, we're just returning into this. Look how beautifully that consequent encroachment holds. And that's exactly what we want to see here. If price is really going to deliver into the sell side, it's going to be bearish. There's no need that this consequent encroachment of this bearish fair value gap should be closed above. So we do wick higher, that's fine, right? We're mohawking a little bit. We actually wick one last time to run out some short-term equal highs. But you'll notice that candle bodies never close above that. Once we run out those buy stops, we reverse and finally deliver into our sell side target and finally that midnight level. So you saw we got the perfect exit right on that low. Beautiful, right? Midnight level is 43.92 and a quarter, or 2/4, sorry, and we get right out that level. So real nice to see that. From there, we just bounce and consolidate now, right? So we're kind of chopping around that midnight level. We're giving a few digs lower into it. You'll see that we engineer liquidity here. So we engineer some sell side liquidity here. And now we actually run back up to clear out that buy side. So now we've picked up buy side. You see how price is bouncing back and forth between liquidity, right? We clear out that buy side, returning into the order block level here. And notice how we're actually still holding the fair value gap. So we're tapping into the OB, but the fair value gap is still holding the candle bodies, never closing back above it. From there, we break sharply, delivering into that sell side. You'll notice that we create a swing low here now. So just continuing to engineer liquidity. And from this point, right, we retrace back up into a fair value gap. So we return back up into the fair value gap. Right, what are we doing while we're returning into that? Well, we're also creating a little breaker, fractalized YouTube model, short-term high cleared. Right, we can continue to see this play out. So even within this setup, say you missed that, well, now you can pick up on the YouTube model here. Right, and we hold that fair value gap, deliver into sell side, deliver into sell side here, and ultimately delivering in and through the 4-hour fair value gap target that we had mentioned from earlier. Here's where you'll see now, right, we share that second entry. So as we break through this 4-hour fair value gap, at the time, because we broke so aggressively through and closed with the bearish, I mentioned how this kind of had my attention as a potential short. So right, shorting at that 4-hour consequent encroachment and continuing to now aim for potential lows. So we go in there quickly trying to do that. Oh, excuse me. Right, so we go in there first, trying to do that here. Short above the fair value gap. We were just going to target swing lows. And we can show the executions here. But once I realized, and you'll see I showed that in the video, once I realized that we had now gone back into the 4-hour fair value gap, so I'm going to move this. Right, originally we were going to try to use consequent encroachment here to get short. Instead, we tap it once and then we close above it, closing above the 4-hour fair value gap now as well, while leaving behind a new discount in the form of this 1-minute fair value gap. So when I saw that, I understood, okay, I'm most likely offsides because we've delivered lower aggressively into lunch, and lunch tends to attack the opposing liquidity that was created prior. So notice how we have buy side here, untouched inefficiency here, buy side here, and ultimately buy side here. Once I see that, okay, we have this discount, we have opposing targets, I go ahead and flip my bias. I understand I'm offsides. So we're able to now pick up longs as price wicks into this fair value gap quickly. So that's where we add. Right, we add in here, stop underneath the candle. And we really just targeted this old sell side pull here. So this old low, because this aligned with our 15-minute fair value gap. So there was a 15-minute fair value gap right above this, right, perfectly aligned with it. We can show you that. So this 15 is right here, right, and that's what we were targeting. So back on the 1 minute now, we see, right, we attack that old low that's paired with the 15. As price digs up into that, we go ahead and close. We'll notice price did hold some other discounts on the way, so we could have stacked, but because it was lunch, we were just content with aiming for that low-hanging fruit. Just under 10 handles, that's plenty enough for us, and we were content with that for the day. From there, we actually did give another opportunity, so we do retrace, right? We were not expecting price to return below this 4-hour. This was our kind of downward objective, and now that we repriced into that and close above, we go back to our original idea, which is just higher prices. So right, we form a short-term high here now. Engineer buy side, give a retracement back up into this down close candle, and notice what we form here now. As we're going back into a discount, we can continue to point these out, short-term lows, followed by that break in structure, leaving behind a fair value gap that we now use to get long, right? That holds with the candle bodies, delivering into buy side. You do get some consolidation after hitting that buy side. Ultimately, we deliver higher again, engineering a new high, right? You see, we kind of created relative equal highs here. So this buy side is what I was looking at, now heading into power hour. And during power hour, right, just before, so at 2:30, we start to retrace back up into this discount. What is this? Well, let's look. We've cleared buy side, we close above. Old highs will act as support. Right near that support, we're also creating a new discount, short-term low being cleared, breaking structure at all of these highs, and we're leaving behind a discount in the form of the volume imbalance here, this fair value gap, and this order block. So a lot of discounts. Right, we end up using this one here for power hour, so that's what our attention was on. As we return into this, notice how this is perfectly aligned with the old buy side. Not random at all there. Right, so the mean threshold of the OB is the old buy side pull. Look at the precision there. Candle body's holding that with laser precision. We tap the low, but the candle bodies are holding that level perfectly. Right, after holding that level, we now get back above this 1 minute. And it was at this point, I was just looking and seeing, right, if we really are bullish, price had no need to return back below these lows now, because we have cleared liquidity here and here, returned into a discount, and now we're breaking a premium in the form of this bearish fair value gap. So we create the inversion that holds us bullishly the rest of power hour and delivers us into that buy side. We actually get a pretty aggressive run higher into, right, the kind of original 930 setup we had here. So we clear all of that buy side that was left behind that we were speaking about. Right, buy side here, buy side here. So all of this buy side gets cleared. And then we kind of just return back into this range. If you notice, this is where the morning price actually opened at, right? The daily candle. And if you see, we closed really right near that level. So in the grand scheme of things, if I show you like this, let's go to like a 1 hour chart. Didn't really go anywhere, just consolidating here. Right, we can show you the daily. Once again, small range. And we expected this because if you listened in our last weekly recap, last week, all one-sided expansion higher. So it just makes sense that even if we want to continue for these highs as we're expecting, we're going to run it into just short-term consolidation. Right, so by following these huge large range days, we can expect smaller range days, which is why we're being a lot more nimble. We're still looking for buy side to be met. Right, we're not really changing on that stance, but we'll just have to wait and see what kind of setups we can get for that. Heading into tomorrow, still have that same idea. We've now repriced and rebalanced the 4 hour fair value gap. Ideally, we don't get back below that, right? We can probably run some lows here, return into like a volume imbalance if we want to pick up some liquidity first. But I would still like to see highs here. You've noticed that we've created kind of relative equal highs. So we have this high just underneath this high. I would like to see those areas be interacted with. So going forward the next few days, we'll see if we can't get up in there. But yeah, thanks for sitting in here today. Next live stream will be tomorrow morning at the same time, right? So we'll meet at 9:25 Eastern. Until then, have a good night, everybody, and talk in the morning. See ya.